going on, everybody? C4, welcome back to the channel. And tonight is 2023 NFL Draft Eve. So I figured I will drop my big board, aka C4's a large board. Board's so large, you need a permit for it. We're going to go through my top 50 players in this year's draft class. And it's just going to be more so a combination of all of my positional rankings that I've been dropping on my Patreon for the last month or so. And if you guys want to get a little sneak peek at that, but ultimately my Patreon is just a good way, great way, the best way to go above and beyond in terms of supporting my YouTube channel. Every single tier of my Patreon, $2 all the way up to $50, you get access to my rankings. It's, it is what it is. It's just something that I can add a little bit of value to my Patreon. And I will also plug right now, tomorrow night we will be streaming the first round live here on the channel. So if you want to come hang out, especially with Philadelphia having 2 first round picks, and what are they going to do at pick number 10? I'm sure we're going to have a fun time. It's just going to be a blast. And I'm not going to get angry and throw something again this year. I would be awesome. Last year we didn't. Year before that we didn't. But we're due for me to get to a point of throwing furniture around due to a Philadelphia Eagles draft pick. So we'll see how that all plays out tomorrow. We're on the Draft Network here, making a big board. They've paywalled a lot of their stuff. Before you could save your big board. Now you get it is what it is. But we're going to start from 1, go all the way to 50. Definitely some unconsensus players, in my opinion, but it is what it is. That's what makes it so fun. That's what I like to do. I think there's 2 ways of making your draft rankings. One is you do big picture, and then you start dividing them up by position. I kind of just go position by position, grade the players, rank the players that I like, and then when all is said and done, put them in a list and order them by which ones I like the most. And there's at least, out of this 50, 10 to 15 that are way off the mark, especially from this site. That's always fun when you get a couple outlier-type players. So without further ado, my top 5. Will Anderson is my number 1 overall player in this draft class. Bijan Robinson at number 2. Jalen Carter at number 3. I got Devin Witherspoon at 4. And Bryce Young at number 5. I think there's only 3 blue chip players in this year's draft class. That is Will Anderson, who's an alien. Bijan Robinson, who everyone knows right now, the tagline, he's the best running back since Saquon Barkley. And Jalen Carter, off the field, maybe there's some question marks. On the field, ridiculous talent. This guy is an outstanding defensive tackle and is pretty much an Ndamukong Suh reincarnated. I'm going Devin Witherspoon at 4. Maybe that's a little bit high for some people, but for me, best tape for any of these top players, I think, in terms of enjoyment. Will Anderson was dominant, especially 2021, was just absurd. Bijan Robinson's highlight reel. You have Jalen Carter made the one-handed sack, last year for Georgia. But, in terms of just, that guy is so awesome to watch him play. Devin Witherspoon, for my money, is, at least tied for first, if not outright the best. He could do it all. He could tackle. He got that dog in him. Bryce Young has been my quarterback 1 for this whole process. I don't necessarily think he's blue chip. I think to be blue chip, he'd have to be, 6'3", 220 pounds. I think those size concerns they're concerns. But as far as playing the quarterback position goes, he's blue chip. But I do think the size, which is what most people will knock against him, does prevent him from being a true blue chip player. At number 6, but that's not hot. There's no spicy takes there. At number 6 on my big board, we're going to go slightly off the beaten path. I'm going to go Paris Johnson Jr. from Ohio State. Number 7, I have Christian Gonzalez, the corner from Oregon. Number 8, I got Peter Skoronski, the lineman, because he could kick into guard, but I classify him as an offensive tackle from Northwestern. Number 9, whoa, where are we? We're going up and down these lists you're trying to. Number 9, I have Brian Branch, the safety from Alabama, and at number 10, Anthony Richardson. So those are the next 5. Again, I don't think there's anything too spicy there. Paris Johnson is, him and Skoronski are neck and neck for who the best tackle. It's very reminiscent of last year where it was Evan Neal or Ike Ekwonu. Who's your top tackle? Different strokes for different folks. Christian Gonzalez, again, not a hot take. Anthony Richardson at 10. Maybe a slight hot take because, there's a project there. But he gets the top 10 because his ceiling is the highest out of any player in this draft class. And I believe that he can hit his ceiling. If I thought it was unlikely he didn't and would not be able to hit that, I don't think you could, even with Gator bias, put him in that category. But I think he can. I think he lands in the right spot with a good head coach. I'm thinking Indy would be awesome. Someone like Shane Steichen to develop him would be incredible. Brian Branch at 9 could be a little bit high. I just think while he's not the S-tier athlete, while he's not a Raz monster, while he's not Razzers.com, I think you just gotta the mix. You gotta have the mix of the freak athletes. That's where you get your Paris Johnsons, your Christian Gonzalez's, your Anthony Richardsons. Those are the S tier athletes. Those are the guys that are borderline generational athletes. And then you gotta balance that out with the guys that are just the best football players, guys that are S tier football players. Those are your Will Andersons, your Bijan Robinsons, your Bryce Youngs, and your Brian Branches. Brian Branch is an awesome safety. I've got a good pulse, good finger on the pulse of safeties. Last year, I was way higher on Jalen Petrie than most, and he only had like 150 tackles, 5 picks for the Houston Texans. So many people were writing off Kyle Hamilton. He was still a top 15 pick for me last season, and he only got the highest rookie grade ever, PFF, for a safety. So I think Brian Branch is in that bubble, man. He just does it all, incredibly versatile, played the Minkah Fitzpatrick role for that Alabama defense very well, and I just think he's a very safe player. There's also an argument to be had that safety is something that can be added to these non-ridiculous athletes that are still very good football players. There's a certain amount of safety for Will Anderson, for Bijan Robinson, for Peter Skoronski, for Brian Branch. These guys they're good football players. They're going to be good in the NFL. They're not just guys that you're gambling on the athletic ability. You're gambling on the traits that they're going to be good. So there we go. Moving on to the next. We're going right back into the athlete segment of these rankings. And this site is way low. I have Nolan Smith at 11. I have Brian Brzee at 12. I got my other list on the other screen. That's why. I have number 13 was Broderick Jones, the tackle, my tackle 3 in this year's draft class from Georgia. 14 is CJ Stroud. And 15, maybe spicy, maybe a little bit. Like, this is our first big outlier. I got Jack Campbell, the linebacker from Iowa. I can justify all these to you. Nolan Smith is an absurd athlete. Former 5-star recruit, much like Anthony Richardson, who I ranked at 10. Nolan Smith is just, the potential is simply incredible. The potential is credible, has the pedigree to believe that the potential is going to be incredible. So I think very much Nolan Smith is in the essence of what made is it fair to say that? It's fair to compare. It's in the essence of what made Travon Walker the number 1 overall pick last year. It's just like, all right, went to Georgia, played well at Georgia, was recruited highly at Georgia. He's a ridiculous athlete. Didn't have crazy production, but I think we're going to be able to make him play his best football in the pros. Those are literally all the exact same things that got Travon Walker drafted 1st overall. I got Nolan Smith at 11. Very similar style, background. Brian Brzee, I'm buying into just, I already know that's higher than most. I think Clemson's defense overall, all these Clemson defensive prospects took a step back last season. Obviously new defensive coordinator, no more Brent Venables. 2 years ago, Brian Brzee was great, and he still was kind of battling some injuries. And as a true freshman, he was S tier, one of the best freshman D-tackle seasons you will ever see. So I'm gambling on the traits that he is going to get back to that level. You are getting a guy. I don't see the regression. I think obviously there is some can he get back to 100%? He did suffer an injury. I'm gambling on. I'm buying in. I'm investing. I'm buying maybe even potentially a little low on Brian Brzee stock. Broderick Jones at 13. That doesn't seem too hot. CJ Stroud at 14. Doesn't seem too hot. He is my quarterback 3. I have it neck and neck between him and Anthony Richardson. The only tiebreaker is I believe they're both, I don't want to say bust potential. I think Anthony Richardson does have more bust potential. CJ Stroud is a slightly safer pick, but their ceilings aren't even really comparable. I think CJ Stroud's ceiling is Dak Prescott. So hey, that's $100+ million quarterback. But I think Anthony Richardson's ceiling is Anthony Richardson. If that makes any sense. His ceiling is something that hasn't really been seen before, if he can hit onto that. So that's why I have a little bit of difference. But the big question is Jack Campbell. Jack Campbell posted a 9.9 RAS, 6'4", 250-some pounds. He's built like an old school linebacker, but can move like a modern day linebacker. It's just, I get linebacker's not a super valuable position, but the same essence, what it has me putting Bijan Robinson at 2. Running back is not a valuable position. Running back, safety, and linebacker are the 3 positions. No one gives it, maybe guard, I guess, to an extent. But tell that to the Atlanta Falcons, who just paid Chris Lindstrom $1 trillion. good players. I'm just, it's one of those ones, just wait and see. He's a great player. Everything, like, the best linebacker won the, what was it, the Bednarik or the butt kiss, which is best linebacker in college football. I think there's something special there in Jack Campbell, enough so that I'm way higher on him than a lot of people currently are. So moving on to the next 5, we are going to have a little bit of Gator bias here. And man, if you told me that there's an absolute powerhouse that has not given up a single sack in his college career, I'm gonna say that that guy's gonna be pretty good at football. So we got O'Cyrus Torrence there at number 16. Number 17 is another player that I am a lot higher on than most. A lot higher, maybe even more so than Jack Cable. I got Darnell Washington as my tight end 1. Then we're gonna put in Jackson Smith-NJIGBA, my wide receiver 1. We then are going to follow up with another tight end, and that is a very safe player. Maybe one of the safest players. Maybe one of the most pro-ready players in this year's draft class. I have Michael Mayer at 19. And then at number 20, we are going with a trait-based edge. Where is he? Maybe I'm tripping. I don't even think I should be tripping. I think he's actually way up here. They're actually maybe higher than I am. And Miles Murphy. So those are my next 5. We go to Cyrus Torrence. I think he's plug and play as long as you don't ask. As long as he's not going to like a scheme that's going to require him to be, pulling. Going to be requiring him to constantly try to get to the second level. He's just a wall, and a wall is valuable. I got Darnell Washington at 17, more so because of the ceiling. Kind of the same way that I have Anthony Richardson as my quarterback too. I think Darnell Washington has the highest ceiling out of all the tight ends. It's a very good tight end class. I think I got five tight ends in my top 50. And I just think at 6'7", 265, everyone knows the tagline on him is he right now is like an extra offensive lineman out there. And then you saw during the combine drills, just making like ridiculous catches. Looked as impressive as any of the other receivers. Obviously at 6'7", he's going to look and play a little bit different than some of the smaller tight ends in terms of their cuts and agility and stuff like that. But ultimately, I am buying, again, vesting early on the Darnell Washington stock. He might not have the best rookie season out of all the tight ends. I probably would bet that he won't. But I think 3 years from now, could be the best of the bunch. Jack Smith-NJIGBA, 18, safe pick. Michael Mayer at 19 is a safe pick. Miles Murphy at 20. I mean, not a lot of debating there. Ridiculous athlete. And in the same kind of breakdown of Brian Brzee, looked a lot better previous years than he did last year. I think that was generally just, obviously, the new defensive coordinator there in Clemson. So now we're moving on to the next bunch. I have Tyree Wilson at 21. Joey Porter Jr. at 22. I have Jahmyr Gibbs at 23. 24 is Darnell Wright, the offensive tackle from Tennessee. And at number 25, we're going back to the tight ends, and we're going to put in Dalton Kincaid from Utah. Now, I'm lower on Tyree Wilson. It's not low enough to be like, oh, I don't even think he's a first rounder. But there's, it seems like consensus he's a top 8 pick in this year's draft. It does kind of seem like Travon Walker to me, and that's a common comp for him, and he's still going. I think he's stiff, doesn't have a lot of bend, height, elite length. I assume he's a great athlete. Didn't work out this offseason, but you can see the explosiveness on tape. But the long, lengthy guys that don't have a lot of bend, they don't hit as much as the twitchy guys with bend, because the twitchy guys with bend can eventually develop a pass rush arsenal that can make them very dominant, make them very tough to stop, because they're going to put the technical side together, and they have the athletic ability that you can't be taught. Someone like Tyree Wilson, don't know if he has the S-tier athletic ability that a Miles Murphy has, like a Nolan Smith has. So you combine that with the fact that I think he's a little bit upright, a little bit stiff, phrasing, mind out the gutter. He's still a good player. Still definitely a first-round talent, just not really top 10 in my opinion. Joey Porter Jr. at 22, pretty copy and paste. Jahmyr Gibbs at 23, Darnell Wright at 24, Kincaid at 25. Again, those are kind of consensus. Those are kind of in line where everyone is on them anyways. Going to the next group, 26 through 30. We got Lucas Van Ness at 26. 27 is a little bit of a spicy one. I got Trenton Simpson at 27. We'll come back to that. I got Deontay Banks at 28. 29 is Emmanuel Forbes, the corner from Mississippi State. And let me just get my list here going down. Number 30, you want to see one that's off the beaten path here. I think he was actually down in the hundreds. I got B.J. Ojulari, 101, according to the Draft Network. I got him at 30. And it's almost the inverse of Tyree Wilson. I think his ridiculous bend and a lot of upside. Might not be an S-tier athlete either, but I think he's going to be a productive pass rusher, a guy that can get you, 7, 8, 9, 10 sacks sooner than later. Van Ness at 26, maybe a little bit lower on him. I think he's just, right now, a very raw pass rusher. Has okay production, and a big trope for Lucas Van Ness is that he wasn't a starter, never really a starter. I think that's more of an Iowa issue than it is him. But I just think, right now he's a very one-dimensional pass rusher with great athletic ability, high upside. 26 is where you get those guys that are developmental and have high upside. We got Trenton Simpson at 27. The reason why I'm higher on Trenton Simpson, I think as like an off-ball linebacker, there are some issues, there are some red flags, some processing, some diagnosing, some missed tackles. But he's also an S-tier athlete. Ridiculous athlete linebacker spot. And in my opinion, I would experiment with maybe the idea that he could become a Micah Parsons type. Not gonna say he has to be, the best defense. I'm not even comparing him to a big guy that could be like a top 5 edge rusher in the NFL. But I think stylistically he can wear a lot of hats for your defense. And I would explore, especially we saw in 2021 for Clemson. I think he had 7 sacks, 12 TFLs, I believe. I think there's a pass rusher in there. I think, honestly, I can relate a lot of things easier to the Philadelphia Eagles. I think he could be used in that Hassan Reddick role. So I think if you value Trenton Simpson's upside as maybe a little bit more, I'm not going to say you're going to make him an edge rusher, but like a pass rushing linebacker, that you're going to put a little bit of a different priority if you just view him as an off-ball linebacker. Deontay Banks at 28, just obviously ridiculous athlete, a lot of pro comps. I think Dominique Rodgers-Cromartie is a popular one. We got Emmanuel Forbes at 29, ridiculous, proven SEC production. And again, I got BJ Ojulari at 30. I think he just got really, really good bend. And I think his best football is ahead of him. Next set, we got another little bit of a spicy pick here that I was actually surprised he was so low on this side. Look, I like this. This is dramatic. How low can we go for C4's number 31 player in the draft? Can you guess who it is as we're scrolling here? Any guesses? Actually, forget where he's at. Holy. Any guesses? Anybody still? Seeing all these names. Anybody? We're going to be back. I'm already seeing a couple names. We're going to back down around this range very soon. How is he this low? There's no way these people that get paid to make this, I'm this far off. Well, I guess I am. I got Jair Brown. Holy shit, at 31. I got Jordan Addison at 32. 33, we're going to highlight one of the true defensive tackles. There's so many just undersized 3 techniques in this year's draft class. A guy that's your traditional I got Keanu Benton at 33. 34, we're going with a tweener linebacker in Drew Sanders. 35, we're going, I'm just going to search now. It takes too long. 35, this is one of those guys where it's I didn't think I actually really liked him as much. And it's just, this is why I do the big board the way I do it. Because you get the surprise. I got Steve Avila from TCU at 35. I would have said, if you guessed where I would have had him, and also I would have been he's probably top 75. Did not think he was top 35. But here we are. I got Zay Flowers at 30. Is that what we need? Yeah, okay. We'll pause there. So that's the next group. I got Jair Brown at 31. I just think he's not getting enough credit. I don't know. Did they write him off because he wasn't an STR? He was the guy, though, during this whole process that I thought was going to light the scoreboard up when he did his combine. Penn State, kind of in line with Georgia, where it's almost just fair to assume that these guys are going to be freaky. Every top-regarded Penn State guy is you're getting at least a 9.3 RAS. Jair Brown, after his pro day, we take his pro day numbers, he was an 8. But his combine numbers were not the best. He was a 6. Not as good athletically, but I just think as a safety, 10 interceptions the last 2 seasons, can play the middle of the field well, anticipates throw, can lay the lumber, big time hitter, doesn't miss a lot of tackles. I don't know. I don't necessarily know why we're sleeping so much on Jair Brown. I think there's other sites. I actually think Daniel Jeremiah had him in his top 50 at some point. I'm in. We got Jordan Addison at 32, Benton at 33, Drew Sanders at 34, and Steve Avila at 35. I mean, Addison, Benton, and Sanders all seem like that's a fair. I don't really need to get confrontational about those. Seems like fair ranking. But I got Avila at 35. I just think he's a kind of. Well, if you see me put Osiris Torrance where he's more of a power guard, a wall. I think similar with Avila. He's gigantic, 330 pounds, man mountain, and versatility. He can play. I think he's played tackle. He's played right tackle. He's played guard. He's played center. That versatility is going to make him highly, highly, highly desirable. And He's a road grader, absolute road grader. So I have him at 35. Moving on to the next 5, we got Zay Flowers, Boston College. Finally, time for Will Levis. We have Julius Brents. We have DeWand Jones. And lastly, guy that I'm surprised is still here. I got Josh Downs. So we got 2 wide receivers. I think Zay Flowers reminds me a little bit, like I watch him, you're like, throw a pro comp out here. It's a little clickbaity. It's a little bit like, hot takey, but like he kind of reminds me of Antonio Brown when Antonio Brown was there for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I don't think he's insane. So that's kind of working for him. I got Will Levis there at 37. I think he still goes to the first round. I think he probably still goes top 10. There's a lot of desirable traits. I'm not saying that he's going to be a bust. I just think the things that, I don't know. I guess with the development of Jalen Hurts, almost anything is possible. But like, I think he's a little slow to read what the defense is showing. He got absolutely pummeled at Kentucky sometimes on clear, the arm talent is undeniable. Will Levis, arguably, probably the second best arm talent in this year's draft class after Anthony Richardson, maybe even debatably. Maybe there's a little Gator bias in there. But there's also elements of his game that scream Carson Wentz to me. Just like, you idiot. What are you doing? And like, maybe there's a little PTSD. Maybe you look at someone else that didn't get burned by the Carson Wentz era. They might view him a little bit more favorably. We got Julius Brents at 38, Juju Brents, 9.99 RAS, height, weight, speed, and in a draft that you're going to see a lot of these Tariq Woolen types go sooner than later because it's a copycat league. I'm buying in on Julius Brents. Plus, I think it's fair to classify him as a defensive back. I think you have 2 opportunities of him becoming a good player. He's recruited as a safety. I think he tackles well enough that he could probably make that move to safety. So getting that 2 swings on either Julius Brent hitting at a corner, outside corner, or hitting as a safety, I think there's some added value there. DeWand Jones is just gigantic. I'm buying in. I'm a Philadelphia Eagle fan. Anytime there's something that kind of looks like a Jordan Mailata, talks like a Jordan Mailata, walks like a Jordan Mailata, maybe not as freakily athletic as Jordan Mailata, but like I think DeWand Jones is going to be very good. And then I got Josh Downs. Watched a lot of North Carolina games last year. His connections with Drake May made me a believer. I think you get a guy that has inside-outside versatility, probably finds home in the slot the next level, but I think he's a guy that just wins downfield, great route running, doesn't drop the football a lot. Really, really good football player. And then rounding out, we got 10 more left. Number 41, we are going to go with Kalijah Cansey. Number 42, we're going to go with Joe Tippmann, the center from Wisconsin, my top center in this year's draft class. Number 43, I'm going with my sleeper wide receiver who's not as much of a sleeper anymore, but before he put up like a 9.8 RAS, before he tested out the gym, I was already like, he was one of my guys. He was the guy that I was pounding the table like, this is going to be the value wide receiver, and he's probably not going to be a value wide receiver anymore. I think he's going to go he might go in the second round now. He reminds me a lot of a former teammate. Just typing in at this point, but we keep scrolling. I want to find him because I like this. This builds the tension of like how much different is. Where is he? It's Jonathan Mingo, wide receiver from Ole Miss. Has a lot of A.J. Brown to his game. Maybe not as technically sound as A.J. A.J. Brown. You got to remember, A.J. Brown was one of those guys back in the day that like you always see those drastic changes. Let me finish the top 5. I'll get back to that. Then I have Quentin Johnson. And then I have Anton Harrison, the tackle from Oklahoma, who is right there. That is my next 5. So, Kalijah Cansey, lower than some just because historically short. Length is something that's important. Length is like almost right in line with the athletic ability. Like it kind of goes hand in hand. Like, oh, you're a freak athlete, but you're like historically small for the position. Now, I don't want to be a double standard because I'm not holding that against Bryce Young a lot, but Cansey literally has like there's no other comp for how short he is. Now you can play him on the inside, which is where likely he's going to be a 3 technique, and you probably can flex him out to a defensive end or maybe a 3-4. I don't even think you could get by with a 3-4 end just because it's going to be tough, but the traits are there. We got Chip Tippmann as the best center in this year's draft class. Harrison at 45 makes sense. So the 2 I think we got to defend here are the 2 wide receivers. Quentin Johnson is a top 10 player on some people's boards. He might be the wide receiver 1. I just think, and I'm a little worried about the bust potential. There's some wow plays for sure, but I've seen for every wow play a half, at least a quarter, if not a full half of like watching this guy, expecting him to be the best wide receiver in the class, and then seeing a guy that like, oh, he's going to be Kevin White in the NFL. So there is some boomer bust potential in Quentin Johnson, but in a draft that is heavy on the slot wide receivers, you could very well, Mingo, who I have ahead of him, I have Josh Downs ahead of him, I have Zay Flowers ahead of him, I have Jackson Smith-NJIGBA ahead of him, and I have Jordan Addison. There's a chance all 5 of those guys ahead of him are going to be slot wide receivers. So if you are in the market of valuing guys that are going to be able to play the X, guys are going to be able to get separation downfield on the outside, maybe you're going to value them better. But I'm just trying to value the best football players. And Jonathan Mingo, freak athlete. He's going to be a big slot, I think. I saw some pro comps like Quincy Enunwa. He's a lot more explosive than that. Stylistically reminds me of A.J. Brown. He's a better athlete than A.J. Brown. Not as refined as A.J. Brown. You got to remember. And how many times do we see it? The big names, like right now, if we start talking about the 2024 draft, like there's going to be guys that just fall off. There's going to be guys that we place at the top. We're going to assume that they're going to be the best player at the position. But then as you go through the draft process, you find other guys and you find reasons to hate them and knock them down. That was A.J. Brown. A.J. Brown went into his final college season as wide receiver 1. And then he ended up going in the second round for whatever reasons. And I kind of, I think there's a little bit of that in Jonathan Mingo for sure. Big fan of him. I think he's going to be a great player. So, all right, last 5. Final 5 on the big board. I got Tomi Adebaware at 46. I got Sam Laporta, the tight end, at 47. I don't know how far we got to go for this one. Did I already miss him? Maybe the site's not sleeping on him as much. Oh, he's right there. Clark Phillips, the third out of Utah. I then have Isaiah Foskey from Notre Dame. And my final player on my top 50, I have, and I was surprised, I have Keely Ringo from Georgia. So my last 5, we got freak athlete, 3 technique. I actually think, I don't know if I want to take a bet. Who's going to have the better career? Adebaware or Cansey? They're kind of in that same bubble for the undersized 3 technique. Weird. Like they're classified as a D tackle, even though they're 280 pounds. But, at least he doesn't have the historically bad length going against him that Cansey has, but just freak athlete. We got Sam Laporta, reminds me of Dallas Goedert. Clark Phillips, not a great athlete, but in that bubble of like, he's just such a good football player. There's, he reminds me a little bit of like Roger McCreary. I was higher on Roger McCreary last year coming out of Auburn than most, and I think ask any Tennessee Titan fans, they're very optimistic about his future. And he kind of was the same deal. Very good football player, maybe not the best athlete, doesn't have elite length, but they win because they're damn good football players. I think that's Clark Phillips. Isaiah Foskey, I thought I was going to hate him. I thought he was going to be a guy that I thought was just generally going to be overrated. Kind of have him fairly rated, 6'5", ran a 4.5, great athlete, proven production at Notre Dame. I think he's very undervalued in this edge rusher class. And we finished with Keely Ringo at number 50. We're going with the athletes. I think maybe the reason why I got on with Keely Ringo, now, he got absolutely abused the last couple of games for Georgia. Like, he was literally getting picked on. I'll never forget that game against LSU, where they were picking on him all game, and I was like, holy shit. This was a guy at that point in time, I was like, is he the best corner in this year's draft class? Could he be? Had that hype behind him. And then Jaden Daniels got knocked out of the game for LSU. They brought in their backup quarterback, and the backup quarterback was going after Keely Ringo and finding success. And, like, these are good wide receivers at LSU. I don't think it's the second coming of Justin Jefferson and Terrence Marshall and Jamar Chase and all that. And they were just cooking him. So, like, that was bad. There's always PTSD when I was trying to think about how to properly evaluate Keely Ringo in this class. But I do think, kind of in the same idea of Julius Brents, is that you might have a guy that he's a great athlete. Maybe not ridiculous athlete. He did not test the best in the agility drills, which shows on tape. He looks stiff. He's a stiff athlete. But if he doesn't make it as like your height, weight, speed corner, I think he's a solid tackler. So like there's a chance you might get 2 swings at it, and he could be and develop into a really good safety. So I didn't want to hold too much about the last couple games for his career at Georgia against him. Generally speaking, he's played some good football. He's a great athlete, and because you get 2 opportunities at 2 different positions, I value that within my top 50. So there you go, fellas. I don't know. I don't think there's anything that's too hot takey, but obviously enough of like my guys to worth talking about and showing you some of my favorite players for this year's draft class. Any big time surprises? At least looking at this site for my top 50, they're like kind of like consensus top 50. I don't think there's anything like super egregious. Keon White has like maybe some first round buzz. I'm not buying that. Jalen Hyatt, potentially lower on him. Hendon Hooker, Jordan Battle, DJ Turner, Luke Musgrave. I think 18, I think Derek Hall and Cam Smith are just, rated really highly on the site. But I would love to hear what you guys think about my big board. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Are you excited? What players from my top 50 do you want to see your favorite team draft? Let me know in the comment section below. And I'll see you guys back here tomorrow in the afternoon for a predictive mock draft. And then tomorrow night, live here on the channel, we'll be live streaming the entirety of the first round. And hopefully I don't throw any furniture. But that'll do it from here today, guys. Thank you very much for watching. Until next time, it's your boy C4 saying peace out. Love ya. Have a good one.